Well, the title of this talk, as I suppose you saw somewhere, is Necessary Illusions, Thought Control in Democratic Societies. The title is intended to be paradoxical. It should be. Thought control and indoctrination are inconsistent with democracy, therefore one can't have thought control in a democratic society. There is a standard view about this matter. The standard view is expressed, for example, by Supreme Court Justice Powell, who speaks of what he calls the societal purpose of the First Amendment, that is, enabling the public to assert meaningful control over the political process. Now, he happens to be speaking about the media and their crucial role in affecting this societal purpose. And similar remarks could be made and should be made about the educational system, about publishing, about intellectual life generally. But the media are particularly important in providing free access to information and opinion, and therefore allowing a democratic process to function in a meaningful way. So the media therefore fulfill what the New York Times on Sunday called their traditional Jeffersonian role as a counterbalance to government power. And if one takes Jefferson seriously, as he may or may not have taken himself, he would presumably have gone further, speaking not just of counterbalancing government power, but counterbalancing other concentrations of power, specifically the kinds that developed in the post-Jeffersonian period, corporate power, which is the dominant feature of modern social life. Well, all of this seems obvious, even tautological. What else could be the foundations of democracy? But it's worth bearing in mind that there is a contrary view, and it probably is the dominant view among liberal democratic theorists. It goes right back to the origins of modern democracy in the English revolutions of the 17th century, English Revolution of the 17th century. At that time, great concern was expressed over popular agitators, itinerant preachers and workers with their little printing presses and their pamphlets and their public speeches, which were removing the cloak of mystery behind which the Parliament and the King were carrying out their much narrower struggle, the one you read about in history books. Now, these people were, in their words, they were people who wanted to be represented not by lords and gentry, but by men of their own kind, men who know the people's swords, quoting from Leveler pamphlets. And observing their activities, one contemporary historian warned that by revealing the workings of power, they will make the people so curious and so arrogant that they will never find humility enough to submit to a civil rule, which is a big problem. Well after these radical Democrats had been crushed by about 1660, John Locke wrote that day laborers and tradesmen, spinsters and dairymaids must be told what to believe. The greatest part cannot know, and therefore they must believe. Now, these concerns arose once again during the American Revolution, as they typically do during popular revolutions. It was not until the 1780s that the radical Democrats in the American Revolution were crushed, and there was no more any thought that people would be represented by people at that time, men of their own kind, who know the people's swords. They would be represented by those qualified to rule over them, of whom they were permitted to make a selection, the modern democratic political system, which follows the principle laid down by the founding fathers that those who own the country ought to govern it, quoting John Jay. Now, all of this comes right to the present. I won't try to go through the history, but there's a rich tradition expressing these same views, comes right down to the present. In the modern version, Reinhold Niebuhr, for example, the revered moralist and foreign policy analyst, he explained that, in his words, rationality belongs to the cool observer, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith. and this faith relies upon necessary illusion. I thank him for offering me my title. This faith relies upon necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by the myth makers, by the cool observers, folks like us, smart guys who know how to serve power. Walter Lippmann, Dean of American Journalists, a few years earlier, talked about what he called the manufacture of consent, which he said has become a self-conscious art and a regular organ of popular government in a revolution in the practice of democracy. And that's appropriate because the common interests very largely elude public opinion entirely and can be managed only by a specialized class, Niebuhr's cool observers. The same concerns explain a good deal of the fear of radical movements abroad, right up to the present. So, for example, in the early 19th century, the Tsar of Russia was deeply concerned about the contagion of revolutionary ideas coming from American democracy, which might undermine the conservative world order that he and Metternich and others were presiding over. And a century later, the roles were reversed, but the same ideas were expressed. At the time when Woodrow Wilson sent troops to join the Western intervention against the Bolsheviks, his Secretary of State, echoing the Tsar a century earlier, warned that the Bolsheviks were appealing, I'm quoting Robert Lansing, were appealing to the proletariat of all countries, to the ignorant and mentally deficient, who by their very numbers are urged to become masters. The same ideas appear explicitly in the public relations industry. The patron saint of the modern public relations industry, Edward Bernays, received his training in the Creel Commission, which he was a member of, and he later developed the concept of what he called engineering of consent, which he said is the essence of democracy, and is something which he practiced, for example, in demonizing the democratic capitalist government of Guatemala when he was working for the United Fruit Company in early 50s, paving the way for the CIA coup, which has turned the place into a charnel house. The public relations industry from the very beginnings, from the early part of the century, described its task as controlling the public mind, educating the American people about the economic facts of life to ensure a favorable climate for business and a proper understanding of what Lippmann called the common interests. The public mind is the only serious danger confronting the company. An AT&T executive commented about 80 years ago, and those problems have been addressed ever since. That's the role of the PR industry. There's also an academic twist to all of this. In fact, it's a major theme in the academic social sciences. One of the leading American political scientists, the sort of major figure in the field of communications, Harold Lasswell, wrote an interesting commentary on this in 1933 in the International Encyclopedia of Social Sciences, the entry under propaganda. Those were more honest days. People called things what they were. He wrote an entry under propaganda in which he explained that we must not succumb to democratic dogmatisms about men being the best judges of their own interests. They are not. The best judges are the elites, who must be ensured the means to impose their will for the common good. And the means, he said, are a whole new technique of control, largely through propaganda. And it's necessary to do this because of the ignorance and superstition of the masses.